Hi all, I'm Poorni, working as an assistant professor in the Department of Industrial Biotechnology, BIHER, and I'm going to handle the subject called an industrial waste treatment and disposal. And in today's class, we are going to see about the industrial waste and what are the types of an industrial waste, what are the various forms of your industrial waste from the different industries that has been present in our surroundings, and what are the effects on their waste. So what are the effluents that has been effect on the various sources like streams or land or an air we are going to see about. So the today's topic is about your industrial waste and its effect on the streams, land and air. So before getting into the topic, we must be known what are the waste that has been segregated. So when we talk about a waste, so what are the various waste that we get it from the various sources? So here when we talk about the waste, the first one is said to be the organic waste. So when we talk about an organic waste or a paper waste that has been excluded from the domestic purposes, also that those waste is also to be treated as the waste that has been in case from the domestical purposes. So the next one is the plastic, then glass, then the metal waste and the e-waste, and then all these waste that can be combined together to form as a mixed waste. So here we are going to see what are the various forms of the waste we are having and what are the various forms of the waste in which how it has been affected on the various sources of our land or water or air. Okay. So here when we talk about the first waste, so that can be segregated as a chemical waste. So how this chemical waste can be done? This chemical waste which has been generated by the various factories and the processing centers and the warehouses and the various plants. So here whatever the waste that it is being generated, and those waste that has been generated from the various factories and the various processing industries and the various processing plants that has been producing a consumable one as well as a non-consumable ones. Okay, so the next waste, and when we talk about this chemical waste, there are different kinds of a chemical waste that has been. So the one, it might be the harmful or a dangerous one, or it might be the chemical residues or the waste disposal. We have to be, when we are disposing into the environment, it has to be taken care so that it has to be carefully disposal into the environment. So when we talk about what are the various guidelines that has to be followed, so each and every industries that has been able to produce any various forms of a product as a byproduct, if we are leading into the, if we are disposing those waste into the environment, that has to be followed the rules and regulation that has been framed by the EPA and safety and a healthy administration. So EPA is nothing but a environmental protection agency. So that they have been given some rules and regulations that has to be followed, so that it has to be make the waste that has to be treated before leading into the environment. So the guidelines that has to be regulated by the various government and environmental agencies like your EPA, that is the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. So when we talk about a chemical waste, that has to be segregated on site in the sense where the waste is being produced. Okay, so it might be your chemical industries or bioprocess industries or sugar industries or petroleum industries or drug pharmaceutical industry. So it might be any type of industry that has to be segregated on a particular site, and then it has to be disposed to the environment by following those rules and regulations that has been framed by the Environmental Protection Agency, that is the EPA. So the next one is said to be the solid waste. So when we talk about a solid waste, so here when we talk about a solid waste, the same thing, it industrial various industrial sources that has been producing the solid waste, that includes a variety of different materials like a paper, cardboard, or a plastics and a packaging materials, their wood and a scrap metal. So when we are talking about the solid waste, this solid waste we cannot be decomposed, or sorry, it cannot be disposed directly into the environment, as it affects the in and around surroundings which has been present in the form of humans or the form of an animals or in the form of an agricultural field. So those type of a solid waste that has to be recycled and reused inside the industrial plant for its environmental management. So it has to be recycled and reused in the case of a plant itself with the help of a recycling center which has been located, that has to be planned inside the industry. So here when we talk about this solid waste, there is a comprehensive solid waste management plan that has to be involved, or that has to be framed, so that the recycling and of a material that has to be done so that it will be an eco-friendly one before that, and it is said to be the cost-effective methodology if you are using a recycle and a reusing of those waste as a solid one. For it can be used as an input for the another form. So this recycling center can process the majority of industrial solid waste that can reduce your waste disposable cost. So the next one is said to be the toxic and the hazardous waste. So when we talk about the toxic and the hazardous waste, so here this type of a toxic and hazardous waste that can be comprised of a materials that causes various health issues. Like your it will, if we are any of a gas that has been released in the form of a toxic one that has been released in the case of petrochemical industries, that is said to be the toxic one. So if this gas is said to be the toxic gas, then if it has been entered into the environment, so what happens, we'll be inhaling that in and around, so that it will be making your health issues like an respiratory problems, right? So here it will causes a various health and a safety problems if the waste has been disposed, if it has not been handled properly. So here the EPA regulations, that is the Environmental Protection Agencies, whatever the agencies that has been a guide that has provided a various guidelines for the waste that has to be disposed, so that has to be followed when we are making those waste to be entered into the into the surroundings. Okay, so here it includes what are the various dangerous products. It includes the dangerous byproducts, materials that can be generated from the factories and the farms and the construction sites or laboratories or garages, hospitals. So those types of all also it includes in the case of a dangerous and a hazardous and a toxic waste. So here so the EPA the rules and regulations that has to be followed, that has been framed by the EPA and the State Department, that regulates the toxic and hazardous waste disposal, so that it has to design in such a way the waste disposal to be a legal one at a special designated facilities around the countries. So the next one, based on this waste. So this waste are said to be the three types of a pollutant. So here when we talk about what are the various types of a pollutant, the one waste is from one of a food industries. Next one is of the plastic waste and the leaves and the street garbage. So that is said to be comes under in the case of a domestic one. And food also is said to be the domestical one. And the paper is said to be the industries that has been laid waste from the paper industries. Then the glass and the ceramics, metals and rubber. This not only this is said to be the source of a solid waste. There are various other sources like the drug pharmaceutical waste, and then solid waste management, and then your sugarcane industries waste, and then the battery production industries waste, your cold and beverages. What are the various types of a waste that comes under the category of a pollutant? So here when we talk about a waste, the one waste is said to be the chemical waste, then we said to be your solid waste, then it is said to be the toxic and hazardous waste. So the next one, we move on to the wastewater. So how this wastewater has to be treated and how it has to be disposed into the environment without affecting it, so that it will not cause you any health issues for the human beings as well as the animals which are being around the industry. So when we talk about the wastewater, it can be defined as a wastewater that can be defined as a wastewater that has been output from your any domestic or a commercial or a industrial process. So the basic definition that the wastewater is said to be the water which has been utilized for a various purposes that is being excreted by the domestic or a commercial or from the industrial processes, or it can be defined as the water that has a negatively affected in a quality by the humans. So it can be affected because we are producing any type of a product, and that leads to the byproduct that has to be excreted through your output as a wastewater. So those wastewater that has been negatively affected in a quality by the human. So this used water that flows out of a person house or schools or any office building. So whatever, wherever the things, whatever we are doing, and what are the various waters that we are using, and those water outlet that we call it as a wastewater that can be excreted from the buildings or schools or houses. Okay, so this type, like a washing of a clothes or a brushing of a teeth or bathing of self, so that those wastewaters that has to be what that has been flown out from our domestical purposes had to be the domestical wastewater. So this wastewater can also be produced during the industrial operations like clothes or manufacturing chemical product. So here it comprises of the liquid and a solid waste that can be discharged from the domestical purposes or from the commercial properties, which is being able to produce any type of chemicals, or your any type of industrial plant that is able to produce a large amount of an acids or alcohol that is being able to produce, or the waste that if it has been exerted from the agriculture farming, and those things is also said to be treated so that the wastewater can be recycled back. So here when we talk about wastewater, there are a wide range of the contaminant at this water, so which might be comprises of a high percentage of concentration in the case of various heavy metals will be there. So those it has to be called as a contaminant or a pollutant. So that can be varied from a various concentration that can be varied by the composition of a water. So the composition of most wastewater is about a 99% of a water by the weight, and the remaining one is said to be comprises of your organic matter or inorganic matter or microorganisms that requires the removal. So here, so how we can characterize the study of your wastewater. So when you talk about the study of your wastewater, as we all know that the wastewater is said to be the water as a waste that has been negatively affected in the quality by the human beings. Okay, so when we are producing or when we are using in the case of a domestical purposes, or it has been able to produce in the case of a production from the industry. So how we can characterize those wastewater? So the first characteristic is based on a classification of a physical one, and then the chemical characteristics. Then the third one is said to be the biological characteristics. So here when you talk about a physical characteristics, what are the various factors that have been able to define the wastewater is based on this thing, so that it can be classified that comes under your physical characteristics. And chemical characteristics, they said to be purely due to the chemical impurities or the dust particles which have been present in the case of the wastewater. So the next one is the biological characteristics is due to the contaminants that is said to be the microorganisms, whether it is there. So here when you talk about the physical characteristics, the things are the turbidity, color, odor, total solids, and a temperature. Then the second one is said to be your chemical characteristics, that is due to the chemical impurities that can be classified based on a COD or a TOC, that is the total organic carbon and nitrogen, phosphorus, or chloride, sulfates, alkalinity, pH, heavy metals, trace elements, and the other priority pollutant. The next one is said to be the biological characteristics. So when we talk about a biological characteristics, this is purely due to the presence of a microorganism which is being present in the wastewater. So we are going to study about the BOD, that is said to be the biological oxygen demand or a biochemical oxygen demand that has been required for a microbial population. So when we talk about the physical characteristics of the waste, what are various ways? So as we have been seen, the color. Okay, so the first one is said to be the color. So here when we talk about a sewage fresh one, it's said to be the normally brown. or yellow in a color. So, but when it has been fermented, or when if it has been taken a long time, it has been accumulated in the particular area, the color will be turned into the black in a color. So that is why we can be studied whether this is a wastewater or a fresh water. So the fresh sewage is normally a brown in color or yellowish in a color, but when it takes a lot of time for its returning, that turns black into black in color. So then the odorness. So when you talk about a wastewater, the odorness, it includes a sewage. Typically it develops a strong pungent odorness. It can be developed. So the next one is the temperature. So here, due to the more biological activity in the sewage, wastewater, or any form of a wastewater from the industries, will have a high temperature. Why it has? Because there will be a n number of a microorganisms that has been involved in the particular activity. So that leads to the generation of a heat, so that it will have a higher temperature. Then the turbidity. So when you talk about the turbidity, it is due to the suspended solid in the wastewater, and which will have a higher turbidity or a cloudiness. So if it has been, if we are not removing that wastewater in a particular location or a region, that will get accumulated, and what happens, it will start to give you the strong bad odorness in and around the surroundings, as well as the turbidity of the wastewater, which will be turned into a higher one. The next one is said to be the chemical characteristics of a wastewater. So when you talk about the chemical characteristics of the wastewater, what are the various forms that can be defined? So when you talk about a chemical, here it can be defined with the help of a various terms called a COD, that is the chemical oxygen demand. So here it is said to be the measuring of organic materials in a wastewater in terms of oxygen, which is able to recur to oxidize those organic materials. That is a COD. Okay, so the next one is a TOC, that is a total organic compound. So the total organic compound, the same as a COD, it can be defined as a measure of the carbon which is required with in terms of oxygen required to oxidize those organic materials. So how much amount of the organ is being required for your conversion of your organic materials in the case of your to oxidize those organic materials in the case of your sewage wastewater or industrial wastewater. And then the nitrogen is said to be the organic nitrogen, which is said to be the amount of nitrogen which are present in the organic compound. So when we talk about the chemical characteristics, the first one is a COD, which explains how much amount of the it is defined as a measure of an organic materials in wastewater in terms of oxygen, which is required to oxidize the organic material. Then the TOC is said to be the total organic carbon. It is said to be the measure of a carbon within the organic material. Then the nitrogen, it is said to be the amount of a nitrogen which is present in the organic compounds. Okay, so here, so what are the various chemical compounds that will be present in the case of a wastewater? Even if it is of an industrial wastewater or domestic wastewater or a food industries wastewater or a pharmaceutical industrial wastewater. So what are various forms of the chemical which will be having? It will be having one of the main element is said to be the phosphorus. Okay, so those phosphorus will be present also in the case of an inorganic phosphorus in the form of a phosphate, PO4. Okay, so and the other chemicals are chloride, sulfates, heavy metals, mercury, zinc, cadmium, copper, nickel, chromium, silver, arsenic. So these are the various chemicals that has been present in the case of a pollutant or a contaminant in the case of a sewage or industrial wastewater, that can be characterized to study with the help of the chemical characteristics of a wastewater. So when we talk about this thing, how we can there are various methods that can be used to determine the different concentration of these chemicals using various studies or a various tests. So those things that can be done with the help of this chemical analyzing and a physical analyzing characters of wastewater is said to be the important role in the case of a wastewater treatment process. So when we are going to treat this wastewater with the help of a physical or a chemical mean, that has various disadvantages. So we are making use of the microorganisms for making the chemicals that to be converted into the simpler form for its estimation. So here in this case of your next one, you'll see about the biological characteristics of the wastewater. So when you talk about the biological characteristics of the wastewater, so what is said to be the BOD, that is the biological oxygen demand. So it is said to be the amount of an oxygen which is needed to oxidize your organic material with the help of your microorganisms. So when we talk about a COD, it is said to be the amount of your oxygen which is required, right? So for your things that has to be oxidize your organic material, that is without the help of your microorganism. Here the BOD, which is able to measure how much amount of the oxygen has been needed for your organic material to be oxidized with the help of your or with the action of your microorganisms. Okay, so the next one is biological important characteristic is said to be the NOD, that is the nitrogenous oxygen demand. It is said to be the amount of an oxygen which is needed to convert the organic into the inorganic form. So which means that the organic ammonia or the nitrogen that can be converted into the nitrate form with the help of a nitrifying bacteria or a nitrification bacteria. So this will be seen in the case of a nitrogen fixation. Okay, so here in this case, the NOD represents a nitrogen as oxygen demand, which is said to be the amount of an oxygen which is needed to convert the organic material, that is said to be the ammonium nitrogen into the nitrate by the help of a nitrifying bacteria. So then when we see about the microbial life in the case of a waste, so what are the various organisms which will be present? There will be a n number of a microorganisms which will be present that can be characterized, and it can be divided in the various forms. The majority of your thing that will be having your bacteria, then it will be having your fungus, then the virus, then your algae. And what are the other factors it involves? So here it involves your rotifers and your nematodes, and also the other form of a wastewater that we have your oil or a grease. So this type of an oil or a grease constitute that can be produced in the case of a food based and other industrial petrochemical waste. Okay, so this amount of this, it can be varied from a range of a 10 to the 109 mg per liter. So when you talk about the sources, so when you talk about the pollutant and how it is having the industrial waste, so it can be caused by the emission of the industrial waste that is treated as an effluent into the water bodies. So it leads to the water pollution. So here we need to treat this water before getting into the, or before leaving that into the environment, so that your environment will be safety, so that it will causes any health issues in and around the industries. So this type of industry waste, it includes an organic pollutant and toxic chemicals like heavy metals or acids or alkalis or iron and steel industries or food industries or a mine or a detergent and a paper industries. So here, when we talk about the various types of pollutants, as we have been seen, what are various metals? So here we have been seen a lead, cadmium, phosphorus, or mercury. These are the various heavy metals that can be act as a pollutant. So from where this heavy pollutant that has been exerted out? So from the various sources like a paint industries or a painting industries or a petrochemical industries, your petroleum base will be. So here in this case, when we are when we are having this pollutant, this has an impact of in the case of your mercury that can be transformed into the water soluble by the help of a bacterial action. So it contaminates your water bodies. So in terms of water bodies, if it has been affected, it will affect the water body organisms, whatever it has been present. So from the lower level to the higher level, it will be affected. And then the acid drainage is said to be the acid main drainage, which causes the corrosion of the metals, as well as your alkali. When you talk about it, will be a source which is from a textile and a paper industries. Then the oil refineries, then is said to be the petrochemical, the petro industries are toxic to the marine life. So when we talk about the next one, how these molecules or sources or materials that can be recycled or it can be exerted out as a effluent that can be treated. So here in this case, the raw material that has been extracted that can be used as the waste, so that has to be treated as a solid waste. Okay, so when we talk about the thing, so this type of a waste that we can be reused, that's why we have it in a green color, so it can be used for a recycling purposes. So that is a solid waste flow. So here the next one, which is making that into the crude material refining. So whatever the materials we have been selected, that we have to be filtered out. So here that can be filtered out from the crude material refining. So that will be led into the finished product fabricating. Then it will be led into the lived capital goods. So then it will be divided into a consumer goods so that it can be made for a commercial packaging. So that can be treat those waste as a solid waste that can be treated with the help of a municipal sewage sludge. Okay, so those sludge can be treated as a municipal wastewater so that it can be recycle back. That's why whatever the green color is there, the arrow mark, those represents that can be done a recycling one for your solid waste. So whenever we have the materials thing, so whatever the materials is said to be being segregated out, that will be said as a scrap. So those scrap that can be making your finished product, then it will be leading as a recycling demolition for your materials. Then it will be laid into the capital goods. So this type of things that we are making use, so we call it as a recycling purposes. So here whatever the scraps we do get from the initial source and or after the segregation of a material, those things are said to be the scraps, so that can be used as a recycling purposes for the another set of an operations. So the next one, what are the examples of a hazardous waste that can be generated? So that we have been seen earlier. This has been given, what are the various types of a waste that has been generated from the different industries, so that it has been given by the Environmental Protection Agency for solving the hazardous health problem. So what are the various industries we do have? As we have said, the food industries. What are the waste that has been so the agriculture waste water, as well as the food waste, or the domestical water waste, and then the vegetable washing, or whatever the waste we are having, those waste has been exerted from the food industries. The next is said to be the organic chemistry industries. These industries or manufacture or use the chemical or complex organic chemicals, which includes the pesticides or a paints or a detergents or a plastics, for that contaminate the wastewater with the help of a cleaning agents or a byproducts. Then the iron and steel industry, if we talk about, when we have been converting those iron into the steel, it should be contaminate your wastewater with a exerting of an oil as a byproduct, and those oil, when we are leading into the when we are leaving into the environment, it affects your health issues, right, for human beings as well as the animals that are being wandered around the in and around the industry. So that thing that has to be treated with the help of your guideline that has been framed by the EPA for before leading the wastewater into the disposal. Okay, so those treating those products for a galvanizing or a coating, so that in a acid rinse water in a wastewater. So those are which will be results in a iron and a steel industry. So these are the various sources that are said to be the causes of a water pollution. Okay, so when we talk about this one, water pollution, it involves the exploration of your oils, your gases, and whatever the water we have been exerted from domestic or the industrial waste. Those are also said to be the causative agent for a water pollution, said to be the water pollutant. So this has been followed by the drilling to find out if there is a source of oil below. On the discovery of oil or a gas is drilled, and is drilled, and an oil ring can be replaced the exploratory drilling rig. So the next one is said to be the when we are exporting or when we are importing your the large amount of petrol from your Western countries to our country. When if we have been exporting, there will be a leakage. There might be, if there is any chance of a damage in the case of in the ship, so that your oil will be scored off. That is said to be the poured off in the ocean. So those type of water pollution as a water pollutant. So that we call it as the oil spillage or oil spills or oil leakages. So this can be due to the leakage of the oil or a petroleum products into the ocean. So due to the accident of a ships or a oil tank breaches or any leakages, it might be occurred. So it can be stored temporarily. That has been during that have been care must be taken while transporting those by the pipes or tankers. So what are the impact on this one? So when we talk about the various forms, as we have been seen about the various forms of the waste, that has an impact on a pollution as a pollutant, right? So when we talk about the pollution, what are the various form of pollutions we do have? The air pollution, water pollution, noise pollution. So here in this case, if we have been exerted the oil spills, the oil has been, or a petroleum product that has been spilled into the ocean. So those is said to be your water pollution. So that affects your aquatic animals, which is being inhabited in the case of your ocean. Okay, so then that it causes your that harms your coastal maritime. So how it can be controlled? We have to keep a community clean and clean. We have to follow the EPA rules and regulation that has been guided or framed by the agencies, so that it can be so like a segregation of domestic waste as a dry waste and a wet waste, how we are implementing in a various state in our developing country. So that has to be applied for a complete environmental assessment analysis before you're discarding any form of a pollutant. So the next one is the water pollution. So when we are talking about the water pollution, so what are the various water that can be exerted from the various industries, like a food industries or beverage or a pharmaceutical or a chemical or a drug manufacturing? So whatever the water that has been exerted out, so that water that has to be treated before leaving into the environment. Okay, so that it will not affect the aquatic animals, as well as it will not affect the human beings that has been wanted around the in and around the industry. So how this treatment of water pollutions can be done? This can be done with the help of your various networks of waste, that is said to be the sewer lateral pipe, is said to be the wastewater pipe which connects the sewage from the household, that is said to be the domestical wastewater. Then this sewer main pipe is said to be the larger pipe on a main street. So here in this case, from this sewer lateral pipe, the wastewater from the sewer is then led into the water treatment. So from each and every house, whatever the outlet of a domestic waste, it has been come, that has to be connected in a large pipeline called a sewer main pipe. So that is when it has been connected from the sewer lateral pipe that has been designed in such a way for any construction of your own house. If you don't have those pipes, is with the sewer lateral pipe, which is able to connect the sewages from the household. That from each and every individual house, if you have in that particular community, that has to be connected in a large pipe that is said to be the sewage main pipe. That will be led to the sewage treatment plant for a wastewater treatment. So here when you talk about a wastewater treatment, the waste that has to be removed from the water so that it can be reused, or it can be recycled, or it can be using for a watering of your plants for a gardens or something else, right? So how this can be done? So this can be done with the help of a screening and a large size of a waste material that can be leaves or rocks or things that can be easily removed. Okay, so that can be easily removed with the help of the various techniques called screening, coagulation, sedimentation, the biological treatment or filtration, and disinfection. So this disinfection we normally use for cleaning our water tank, by cleaning the water tank with the help of a liquid chlorine, right? So those chlorine, if you're putting, that will make the water to be a disinfected one, so that it doesn't cause any health issues for a human being. So here, what are the various treatment of water waste treatment plant, how it can be done? So here, whatever the waste we are having, that has to be screened or filtered, that sewage system that has to be taken to the aeration tank, then it will be making into the settling tank, then it has been recycled better again back for a recycling purposes. So the next one is said to be your tertiary treatment. So the tertiary treatment, this all this thing coming together and lead to the tertiary treatment. And then when we talk about a tertiary treatment, can be used as for recycling purposes. So like your drinking water purposes, or for gardening purposes, or that is your not drinking purposes, or for agricultural we use for after your filtration. So the next one, when we talk about treatment of a various wastewater, that can be your preliminary or primary treatment, or your secondary treatment, and the tertiary treatment for a recycle of a disposal or a disposal of a treated water, or for a recycling purposes like for gardening of a watering of a gardens. Okay, so those things, what are the various things that we can be seen in the last unit of our industrial waste treatment and disposal. Okay, so here in this case, what are the waste reduction technique in this case? There should be a change in the composition of a product to reduce the amount of the waste resulting from the product use. On reduce or eliminate the hazardous materials that enters the production process, or using the technology for a cutting process. So cutting technology we can call. So involves the changes in the case of a production process, your equipment or a layout or a piping or an operating condition. Then the purchase, what you need to avoid the waste from the unwanted material. Or we need to practice the GOP, that is a good operating practices. Okay, like your how we can be reused or reused or recycled back with a waste minimization program and a management and a personal practice, so that it can be prevent the loss and the waste segregation, helps to reduce the waste at the various sources. So the GOP is said to be like your GMP, the good manufacturing practice, how it is being followed in the case of an all industries, so that the waste reduction technique can be practiced in a good manner with the help of a practices called a GOP, that is a good operating practices for your waste minimization program to reduce the waste at the different sources. The next one is said to be the recycling technique. So when we talk about the reduction technique, immediately it can be come back to the recycling technique, so that making use of the waste or as a source for input from that has been derived from the output for a various formation or for a various process to be carried out. So return the waste materials to the original processes said to be a recycling part, or using those waste material as said to be the input or a raw material for another process to be carried out, as we have been explained earlier. And then the process of the waste material for the resource recovery, and the process of the waste material that can be produced as a byproduct, that can be used as a byproduct for a commercialization purposes, that is said to be the recycling technique. So then we have to advertise the waste materials. So what are the waste materials that can be recycled or reused or regenerated back as an input for a various things? Then what are the various materials that can be recycled, like a papers, right? So then cardboards, and then your what are the things that can be able to degrade in an environment that can be used as a recycled one, rather than using the non-degradable like a plastics or a polymers. Okay, so here in this case, reducing, reusing, and recycling is said to be the three types of a technique that can be used for treating your waste in the form of a various like a solid waste or a water waste. Okay, so these are the various things that has been seen in the case of your industrial waste, which has an effect on an water or a land and a air, how it is being affect those things that we have been seeing in our first unit. Thank you.